Hello, Ethan.
Hello.
It's been a while since we've recorded a podcast together. We've been interviewing a lot of people and it's been a lot of fun. But you sent me this document the other day, the Building Information Modeling Acceptance and Learning Experiences. Do you want to explain to me what they found when they interviewed all these students?
Yeah, it is quite an interesting article. It just came out fairly recently. It came out in 2025. And they sent out the survey questionnaire to 800 students across Australian university to understand the technological acceptance. The method of research is called technological acceptance model perspective for the undergraduate students. So 800 questionnaires sent out, and they got 773 response received, and 607 of them provide substantive quantitative feedback. So it's a very solid research articles, which came out from Australia. And so I read it, and there are some similarity between Australia and New Zealand as well. But in New Zealand, I don't have the research to compare exactly. But what I understand is in Australia, like what we are doing, the Te Pūkanga Unified Program, they also produce like a unified program. So it's like all across the university that they are teaching the same course. So that's one thing. So that's quite similar to New Zealand. And they sent out the questionnaire, and the most of the responses are, if I'm not wrong, let me go back and check the graph. And the most of the response are from civil engineering students, 424 response, followed by construction management students. Very interesting. And architectural students are only 5 among the response. Well, I'm not so sure they received the response or not, but it's and quantity surveying students also responded, and 800 out of 8, so 1% only respond on quantity surveying. So that was the response. The researchers also acknowledged that there will be improvement required because there are certain group of students didn't give enough response, and they need to reiterate the same kind of exercise to architectural students. So let's go and have a perspective. So how they perceive of learning BIM, which is also quite interesting. So they think like about 93% of the students, they think BIM, so using BIMs could be really productive. So that's really good. And they perceive BIM as productivity, accuracy, collaboration, visualizations, cost reductions, and safety risk. So the top one, so let's go productivity is 15.3, followed by accuracy 7%, collaborations 5.9. Safety and risk management, they only perceive as 2%. So these are mainly responded by the construction management and civil engineering construction management. So their response look like they may not apply BIM as safety and risk assessment. I'm also doing BIM course, which is the visual design and constructions, which is taught across Te Pūkanga courses. And it's also one of the focus we assess is for the safety in that sense. Another focus is the perceived ease of use. So we teach the students, they are the first time start using BIM software. So one of the focus is learning curve. So learning curve is 28 responded, about 5% of students say it's difficult learning curve. So it's maybe some maybe new. Yes.
I wonder, Ethan, whether the people that responded, the construction management people, they can really see the use of, what was it? It was civil engineering and construction management, wasn't it? I've got
the highest respondents were in civil engineering, second highest respondents construction management.
So I'm curious as particularly the construction management, the 311 respondents.
Yep.
You really see the use of of BIM as a very useful tool that they can use. But the construction management students are not actually producing that BIM model. The architect students are the ones producing that BIM model. And there's such a few of them responded, only 5 responded. And I'm curious as to whether they had the same inclusion at the beginning, whether there was equal distribution of respondents or that they encouraged or invited equal numbers from each group.
Yeah,
and yet
that's
there's only 5 architects.
yes. So I also had that kind of thoughts when I read that, because almost all the students who received the questionnaire has responded. When you read the articles say 800 students received, and they got the feedback of about 770 plus. I'm not wrong. And so that means whoever received the reply. So that means architectural students may not receive. Anyway, according to the article, these things that the learning curve is one of the challenge. And another thing is a good thing about all the answer is attitude towards using. So when they use, they feel very positive of BIM. So 30% of the respondents, almost 50%, 49.4% think, okay, that's very good. Only 21 thinks very negative or don't want to use BIM. Is another gimmick or something like that. And yeah, and another thing is these other students, so well, they be future intentions, behavior. So they say future use, possibly 20% thinks that, all right, they will be using it. And other things, they talk about the resources in educations and industrial support and maturity. So that are the external factors they highlight. So I think that according to the report, it seems BIM as by the civil engineering students and the construction management students, they think like it's for the productivity tools. That's a main perspective. And although there is a learning curve, the attitude is very positive. So that was about the articles. And it also mentions that they have a qualitative research and interview, and the most of the students reply, and the keywords is efficiency. So they talk about efficiency is the main keywords coming out from the answer. And also they talk about learning. So they look like, as per the Australian feedback, Australian counterparts, they think like a construction BIM is as a productivity tools, and they would like to use in the future. So that was the article about. And also the article mentions that they should investigate for that those who the questionnaire was only focused on certain group, and so that means they need to send out questionnaires more on the architectural students, or possibly quantity surveying students, because quantity surveying students only reply 4 and architectural students only reply 5. So maybe they can be a focus area for the future. And another thing, they talk about AI, use AI, the attitudes towards use of BIM and AI is another thing. Those are the concern here. This is our first BIM talking about the research articles. And again, it's very technical.
They've said that they sent out 800 questionnaires and they got 700 and something, which is about 96% reply.
Yes.
But based on those numbers, that they only sent it out to 6 architectural students, which seems like they didn't send it to the right group of people, or at least they didn't distribute their questionnaire evenly across all of those sectors. Which slightly worries me, because I can see that quantity surveyors, construction management, and maybe not as much the civil engineering, but certainly the construction management, they'd love the idea of building information modeling because they can use it. They can use it to do all kinds of information, but they're not the ones who have to do the steep learning curve in order to produce the building information model. Whereas the architectural students are the ones that have to do all of the grunt work to get that model to a point where the engineers and the construction managers can actually use it. And so I think from that point of view, it's not even between the people who think it's a good idea in use and the people that have to learn how to make it. And I think that the learning curve to do building information model well, I think that you need to have a lot of experience in construction first in order to know what you need to put into the model. For example, it's easy to teach a student to create a door and to assign some door hardware, but actually it takes a lot of experience to know what the detailing for that door is, how's that door keyed, what information is actually important to record about a door in order to make that building information model useful. And so to me, that there's this discrepancy between those that want to use it and those that have to create it. And I think that the study gives us some insight into that, particularly the negative feedback about their learning curve required. And that is substantial. I think we've only got our students for 2 years. We teach them at EIT. We used to teach them ArchiCAD in the first year, where you do a soft introduction to building information modeling. That is, building the model and using it to create the drawings. And that kind of introduces them to the workflow of BIM. But we didn't really get into assigning information or assigning the real information to things like windows and doors. Once you start doing a door schedule, it's actually quite detailed. How's it keyed? How the door's handed? How many hinges do you need? What color are the hinges? Do they have intermittent seals in them? There's a lot of information that you end up putting onto a door schedule in a real world job, which we don't get into when we're teaching at the university level, which makes me think that if they think that the learning curve is steep now, wait till they leave and find that we didn't actually teach them everything they needed to know.
Yeah, because we have no time, because the time in the classroom is quite limited. So they still need to have their own study for learning BIM. Anyway,
it's only one of 8 papers that we teach them in a year.
Yes, true. But the last 2 sentences of the conclusion says the future study may be from incorporating more exploratory qualitative research approaches to capture more nuanced perspective on students' experience with BIM. Additionally, further research should explore how educational programs can better develop process-oriented competencies and while addressing socio-organizational factors that currently limits BIM transformative potential in both educations and industry contexts. A very long sentence.
I've read a couple of research papers. They nearly always end up with this phrase that this study was great, but we actually need more money to do another study because every study leads on to another study. Oh, we found out this. We need more information. We need another study.
We found a gap in the study. So that's an area of improvement. So we just need to do.
Yeah, I think that, it's very interesting. And I really thank you for sending this through. I think that there's a real challenge with getting students to have enough experience to understand what information needs to be attached to a BIM model, a building information model. And it is a very steep learning curve. And today I was looking at somebody's work and they were really not capturing or understanding that concept of we've got a model and we use viewports to create drawings. And when we do the drawing paper, we start with the manual drafting. So you want a line on a drawing, great, get a pencil, you draw, it's done. You've got a line on a piece of paper. But now when you move to BIM, there's a complete concept change where you say, no, we don't get a line on a piece of paper. We model a building and we take a view of that building and we put the view onto a paper space or to a layout. And that's our drawing. Like, but how does it get there? We make a saved view, but how does it get from the model to the page? Because you and I probably don't have that problem, but a new student missing that abstract concept of modeling and then getting it onto a drawing. The way we get it from the model to the drawing to me, is a very abstract concept that if the student doesn't get that, they're lost. And part of the big learning curve, I think, is that first stage of understanding how a drawing is created from a model. And which is why I think it's a good idea for us to start with that low bar of ArchiCAD and just getting the model and getting the drawings out of it. Because the next year, if they go to Revit, then it's a much more advanced building information model. And you can then start to attach much more complex information to objects. So thanks very much. It does worry me that the learning curve required from the students, because the building information modeling doesn't just require knowledge of the BIM program. It also requires knowledge of construction and what's needed in the industry. And maybe the students just can't learn enough in that period, but it gives them a start. They are useful in the industry and they can start getting going and they can develop their knowledge over the years.
So we will talk to you. That's good. So we will continue next week.
Don't forget to follow us on Spotify. It really helps if you follow us on Spotify. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you become a subscriber. And then every time we release a podcast, you'll get notified. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.